Hello class, Professor Sarah Jarowitz here. I'm coming to you on your first Friday lecture of the Summer History of Women in Sport series. And I wanted to just let you know that this is actually going to be, for this Friday lectures, this is going to be a three-part series over the ancient cultures. So you'll be able to have the separate sections available to you to watch separately and go back to if you need to, or just watch at different points, and have like a nice separation between each section. I wanted to, before I get started, I want to make sure that I highlight for you that throughout the lecture series, each Friday when I post a lecture, I will be posing questions to you or asking you to submit some information to me based on the topic of the course material at that point. And that's part of the inquiry forums that I have posted on Moodle and in your syllabus. So you're going to want to make sure that you are taking notes, or you're at least writing down the information that I ask of you, or the questions I want you to answer or to submit to me. This is a way for me to help make sure that I am clarifying any information that seems to have missing information for you or has holes in it, to provide more information, or just to get your responses about the topics that we are talking about, since we don't have an in-class discussion opportunity to do that. This is my way of making up for that. So that's going to happen periodically throughout all of the different Friday videos that will be posted, and they won't be just either at the beginning or the end. Sometimes they'll be mixed in the middle. So obviously this is a way for you to make sure that you are listening and getting a chance to engage with the lectures. The lectures are based off of the readings and the PowerPoints that are posted earlier in the week, the readings from Mondays and the PowerPoints from Wednesday, on the Wednesdays that are posted each week. And so you're going to want to make sure that the things that I highlighted in the lecture video, it's sort of like sitting in class, that you want to really pay attention to things I'm emphasizing that are also from the readings, that are also on the PowerPoints, because those are obviously the most salient points you're going to want to be taking away from the materials that you are engaging in over this summer in this class. So it will help you to, again, make sure that you are doing the reading for further background information, further content, looking at the PowerPoint so that you get the highlights, and then listening to the lecture for additional emphasis on the things that I want to make sure are highlighted, and also for some more sort of stories or extra insight that I can share on the topic for that week. So we're starting with the ancient times. Eventually we're going to move into the Middle Ages and the early modern era. And we're going to be talking about how all of these time periods lead up to what we even today view as the typical and prevailing normal behavior of women in sport and recreational environments. Obviously, you probably are well aware that women have shown and proven or just do any kind of physical activity that they want to pursue. However, it isn't common for most of those activities that aren't sort of your typical female activities to be met with some resistance. And there's a reason for that. There's sort of a long-standing, institutionalized way of looking at what we believe is more of a women's appropriate or a female appropriate activity, physical activity to engage in. And you're going to see how that really does stem from how we saw the woman's role in ancient societies, and then how that transpired and changed in the Middle Ages and then into the early modern era, and how and when recreational habits and sports moved to the United States of America, and American women started engaging in these kinds of activities, and then how it grew in America. So that's sort of the progress we're going to see, starting with the ancient era, ancient civilizations. And so we're going to look at three ancient cultures. We're going to look at the Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, and we're going to look at the roles and treatment of women in these particular societies, their recreational participation by within these cultures, and a couple of notable persons or entities that we want to highlight will also be covered in this section. And when we talk about ancient times, we want to make sure we are acknowledging the bracket dates of the ancient era, which is 3500 BCE, before the Common Era, to 476 in the Common Era, which coincides with the fall of Rome, of the Roman Empire. And so the bracket date is important, right? Because when we talk about ancient times, we want to make sure we understand what era we are talking about, 3500 BCE to 476 CE. And the reason we sort of highlight the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans is because these are sort of the three main ancient cultures that we really capture to this day a lot of the way that we live. Science, architecture, math, governance, so many ways in which we have structured our own societies have come from these ancient civilizations. They had major influence in the civilizations around them, and that directly followed them. And so we look to them because number one, we have a lot of artifacts from their cultures that we have discovered. And there's enough historical content that has been somehow documented and understood and restored that we can gather and gain enough information to sort of get an understanding of how these cultures function. So we do look to these three specifically for that reason. Plus they're sort of fun cultures to look at. The Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans, but that isn't really the main reason why. To me, they're interesting and fun to look at. But we are going to specifically start with the Egyptians. That'll be this first segment of the lectures here today. When you looked at the little bit of information I provided online, and I didn't provide a lot of written documentation, but because it's honestly it is hard to find specifically about women documentation. There's little blurbs here and there, so I tried to find at least something written by a historian, an Egyptian historian, that was published online, that you could get a sense of the woman's role in Egyptian society. And then the images, I think, that are so great that have been captured from their leisure culture, that give us an idea of what the Egyptians did for leisure activity, or what they did on like a daily basis. The Egyptians did leave a lasting legacy. Their architecture was widely copied. Certainly we have found a great respect for antiquities and the excavations of their cultural sites where they inhabited. And again, because they were highly influential to neighboring societies, this is kind of why we land ourselves right there with the Egyptians and the ancient culture to start with our historical context or our background. They did, as you can see from like the images in the PowerPoint, images from your online resource, they did enjoy a variety of leisure activities. They liked to dance. There's definitely an indication that they enjoyed music to a large degree. They enjoyed games. Whether that was sort of like these idea of board games. There's an image there where you can see that there's a couple of people sitting around a table playing some sort of a board game. Or there was like a stick and hoop. Juggling was really big in their culture. We see a lot of images that show people juggling as an activity. Very popular for children up to adults was the juggling activity, or just in general games with balls were pretty popular. in ancient times, and then the other ancient cultures as well, or ancient Egypt and other ancient cultures as well. We also saw wrestling documented in the tomb of Beni Hassan, which is probably one of the most notable archaeological sites of the ancient Egyptian culture, where we have really discovered a lot about their culture in ancient times. We see a lot of wrestling images, swimming images, obviously using that water from the Nile as a big source of their livelihood, not only to live, but also to recreate and to do, to take on like hobbies or extra activities beyond what they needed the water for to live. We also see other images of boating, which we believe and which historians believe to have to do a lot more with sort of the wealthier class, but definitely something that Egyptians enjoyed, again, because of the easy access to water, and how that was just a daily part of their life to be doing things around the water. We see other images of sort of what we would consider like athletics, track and field, like javelin throwing, running. And then there's definitely, along with the boating, we definitely have a sense of like hunting and rowing with, again, using through the use of the water, the Nile River. So you see sort of these images about what the Egyptian society was, what they did, what they engaged in. In general, we do believe women were treated well in Egyptian society, because the belief was the home and family were a major source of delight. And so they wanted to ensure that remained and that sustained. And in order for that to be the case, women needed to be happy and healthy for that to happen. We know about the Egyptian society that leisure activities were enjoyed by all, young and old. I referenced juggling, but certainly a lot of those other activities that I talked about, we see images from what clearly looks like younger humans to more adult aged humans. And so what we can gather from the images that we have, that we've collected from the ancient culture of the Egyptians, is that what was popular for women was juggling, swimming, and dancing, and then boating and rowing if they came from some sort of wealth or great wealth. So again, you'll see images of both male and female engaging in those activities. Particularly, we don't see women doing the wrestling. We don't see women doing the more sort of physically demanding sports. We really do see them, like I said, doing the swimming, the juggling, boating, rowing, dancing, these types of activities, which are, if you sort of can kind of catch on to, pretty individual and fairly low exertion, and it's like physical muscular exertion. Those activities are typically. So we kind of get a sense of where we see, or what we saw as appropriate for women to participate in. I do want to acknowledge that historians believe that it was in the Egyptian ancient culture where the sport or the concept of bowling was created. There's an image in your PowerPoint and also in your resource online of this sort of like limestone lane and a ball sitting there that clearly like lend itself to the idea of bowling. It definitely wasn't bowling like we know it today with the pins, knocking down the pins, but we definitely get a sense that players stood on the opposite ends, like from the images that we have discovered, we've found. Players stood at either end, and they both sort of rolled balls towards one another, one with a larger ball, one with a smaller ball, and they would try to sort of knock, the smaller ball was trying to get into the hole in the middle of the lane, while the larger ball was trying to prevent that from happening. So certainly not the iteration of the sport like we know it today, we've come to know it, but clearly the beginnings of what would point towards or lend itself towards the present day sport of bowling. Again, with the lane and the ball, and more of an individual type sport. We do know that women we see images of women participating in bowling too. So again, bowling along with the juggling, swimming, dancing, rowing, and or boating, if they were of that social class, were these activities that women definitely engaged in. Excuse me. So we also know that women certainly we believe we see clear indicators that women in Egyptian cultures were treated better than other major civilizations in the ancient world. And again, that had to do with the sort of the joy and happiness were legitimate goals of life, and that regarded or that helped make the home and family happy. And so we wanted women to be able to feel that and keep the home happy, and the home as a place, a source of delight. So we do know, because the ancient Egyptian time also had female leaders, Nefertiti, Hatshepsut. These were pharaohs, Cleopatra. These were pharaohs that were in leadership roles, right? That were clear models of strength and courage and toughness and leadership, that we can identify with those women, and symbols of their cultures that are known and well regarded, well studied in today's society. And so we do recognize that women certainly had a significant role in leadership, and so that influenced also, I think, how the Egyptians viewed their women and the importance of them being happy and healthy. And we do get a sense from the artifacts that we see from Egyptian culture, the images of the male and female, that they definitely valued like a fit physique, right? So the images, there's two images in your PowerPoint that I have in there. One is of Hatshepsut, and the other one is of a male pharaoh and his wife. And you can see in both instances that their physical fitness looks clear to be of importance, right? Because they would not make these sculptures. They would not make these sculptures, in the likeness that they did, if this isn't what they valued and held in high regard. So the slender physique, the slight idea of musculature on the male specifically. The female is much petite and slender. So we know that they definitely regarded that as an important aspect of the human fitness, the human form, that they were physically fit. So we do believe that in the Egyptian culture, women were definitely treated better than probably other ancient civilizations of the time. Certainly they were engaging in some sort of recreational habits. Definitely things that were much more individualized. Again, like the ball, juggling, the ball games, juggling, swimming, dancing, these types of activities where, again, not a lot of like physical strength exertion, maybe some stamina and endurance, but certainly not any kind of physical contact with another person, not any kind of team dynamic. Certainly does seem like much more individualized and personal, for personal sort of experience and gain. So that sort of encapsulates the Egyptian ancient culture. This was just part one of this ancient civilization discussion. So hang on tight, or click on the next link, and you'll get to our talk about the Greek society.